Welcome to Impact Duty. I'm your host, Manisha Dadlani Kripalani, bringing you empowering stories of friends and people I admire. Their voices have given me joy and the momentum to share their stories with you. Kalyan Karmakar is a food and travel writer based in Mumbai. His blog, Finely Chopped, has won many awards, and he has authored the book, The Traveling Belly. He is a newbie cat dad and a rather besotted one. Welcome, Kalyan, to Impact Duty. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today because it's on one of my favorite topics, food, glorious food. But first and foremost, how are you?
Oh, I'm very good. It's been a pretty crazy day, so I'm quite looking forward to it. It's very hot in Mumbai after the rains, and we've also rescued a little kitten, me and a couple of friends of ours. So today I took him to the vet and everything. Came back. And talking of food, just before we started, we had some good Mughlai food which someone had sent. So I'm all set and ready for the interview.
Yes, I have to remember that we have a time difference between us. So what is post-lunch for you is now pre-lunch for me. Yeah, so I'm really hoping all the grumbling in my stomach doesn't come through.
I'll be kind and not tell you what we ate.
Well, that's going to be hard considering that this interview is going to be centered around just pretty much that topic. But going back to your journey with food, you're an avid blogger, you're a fantastic cook, an author, and a food columnist, among other things. But I'm going to take you first to your food blogging. You've got an incredible food blog called Finely Chopped, I believe. And you've had it for many years now. So how did that all come across? Or how did that come about?
Well, it started in 2007, which makes it one of the earliest food blogs in India. And blogging was pretty new at that time. Right. So I used to belong to the corporate world. I was a market researcher. And I'd grown up in Calcutta, and then I moved to Mumbai to work here. Right. And at that time, I was sort of in 8 years into my career, into middle management, and a bit of work ennui had set in. I was good at my work, but was looking for a creative outlet. So that's when my wife, Kenaz, who works in advertising, and thankfully she enjoys her job. So she told me that, look, there's something called a blog. So instead of coming and telling me every day about what went wrong, about whatever we ate, wherever, why don't you write over there? And that's why she named it Finely Chopped, because I was supposed to finely chop everything we came across. But then slowly, it became a diary of my life, and I belong to a generation where we wrote diaries inspired by Anne Frank, and of course Sue Townsend's Diary of a Teenager, very different, of course. And then there was Bridget Jones and stuff, and Secret Diary. So it soon became a diary of my life with food at the center. And what was at one time an angry young blog, like they used to say about Miss Amitabh Bachchan, angry young man, has now become like a very, very happy space of food.
Wonderful. And is that what keeps you, or has your blog different from the others? Is it because it's more in the style of a diary?
I would like to think so, because when I started blogging, at that time, that's what a blog was meant to be. It was meant to be a social media account of your daily life. And then I would say that as the sector became more developed and more professional over the last 6 or 7 years, blogs became perhaps a bit more impersonal. They became more like websites. And there are very few blogs today which are personal. Some Instagram accounts are, but I was speaking to someone yesterday who's a travel blogger and from the same vintage as mine. So she was telling me that her blog now is very, very professional in terms of where to go, where to eat. But for me, I think it's still very personal. And which is why even when I write for publications, I'm always a columnist. I don't write as a feature writer. And therefore, it's that very first person feel. So I would like. So in a sense, I mean, you could say that I myself am professionally into it now versus earlier when it was a hobby. But to me, it's still a hobby. I mean, over the last few months, you'll see a lot of content on cats and our cats on the blog, and which someone who was very serious about food wouldn't do. But it's that's what my life is, and so there it is.
Wonderful. And from food blogging on restaurants, you kind of moved into food travel logging in a way. And what inspired you to take that gradual move? And tell us some of the discoveries you've made in your travels.
So I will, for that, I'll just go a bit back into my background or backstory, so to speak. I'm someone who's lived in about 4 or 5 places in my life. I was born in Canterbury in England. Then we were in Liverpool. This is when I was very small. Then we moved to Iran. My dad was a doctor, orthopedic surgeon. So when I was about 5 or 6 years old, so this way back, and the Islamic Revolution happened. So we moved to Calcutta, which is I'm Bengali. None of my parents were born in Calcutta, but they moved in there. My mom grew up in Delhi. So then I spent a large part of my growing up years in Calcutta till I moved out after starting to work and Bombay. So for me, it's always, and even when I was in Calcutta, initially I was in an international school and then in college where there were people from different communities. Mumbai is a melting pot. So I was always interested in people who belong to different communities. Being Bengali, I like to travel. And also in college, I had studied sociology before going to B school. So I'm sort of naturally inclined to be interested in people, in culture. So like I said, it was and is a diary. So which meant that if I went to a restaurant in Mumbai, I would write about it. If I cooked something at home, I'd write about it. And if I traveled to Calcutta or even to Zurich, which I did, the first trip was when I was 2 years old. But then I would write about, and I remember we'd gone to Zurich on a Sunday because I'd gone to present a market research paper at SOMAR, which was at Montreux, and then we did a Swiss holiday in 2008 or something like that. The last stop was Zurich, and I remember having some nice veal cutlets and all that in a very tiny lane, which someone we bumped into there told us to go, and so that's how it is. So it's not that a lot of what I do is very concerted. It's just it happens. It's a reflection of what's happening in my life.
Wonderful, wonderful, Kalyan. And tell us a little bit about some of the food creations you've created. So, I mean, your Instagram posts all are so delightful. So, I mean, I recently saw your breakfast that you created, but I'm actually going to leave you to tell me some of your favorites, something that's come out of Kalyan's kitchen.
I will. I'll tell you how cooking started, because it's not that it's as a kid I learned how to cook. My dad passed on when we were pretty young, but he used to live abroad and therefore he was into cooking. So that story inspired us. And then when I got married, then we were broke, so we couldn't afford to eat out after a year of dating and eating out. So that's when we started cooking, and I'm the one who enjoys cooking more. But soon I became more of an instinctive cook, so I didn't follow recipe books and things. But I'll tell you one big transition which happened was after the pandemic hit us and the first lockdown, and we were all in our own houses. And we live in India, which is a bit different from Europe, in the sense that we have house help, but suddenly there was no house help to cook or to clean up. So it was we were living a very European life, and that's when one started cooking again. But the only difference was that earlier, living in Mumbai, the world was one's oyster, and one got anything. So you wanted, a particular cheese, a particular meat, particular herb. But with the lockdown, very limited things were available. And also you had to do everything, cook, clean, things. So then I started, using leftovers, which is a part of an Indian tradition because nothing's really wasted. But being a nuclear family sort of thing, we would always go into fresh food and things. But one would, so for example, if we made a curry, say with chicken, and if there was some of the gravy left, then converting that by adding some egg to it. or letting nothing go. So you're talking about breakfast. So a few days back, we had a lunch which came in from a local restaurant called Smokehouse Dedi, which is European, and they'd send some
Yes.
house mustard and hot sauce and all that. So today I took a burger bun, sliced that, fried an egg, and added those two sauces which I'd kept. And it completely elevated it to a different experience. So then I started a hashtag called Love Your Leftovers. And a lot of people started getting excited about that, people who would read my page or follow it. And then they started using leftovers, and they would, so for example, if there was a leftover roti from the previous day, then I'd break an egg into it and put it in the pan and make a Calcutta style egg roll sitting in Mumbai. So I think Love Your Leftovers has been the most exciting part of the pandemic cooking.
Right. Wow. And Kalyan, you're also an author. So you've written a book which I believe is titled The Traveling Belly. What an interesting name. I like that one. And you've also, I believe, coined a term or use a term which I've come across, grunge eating. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about your book, why it's different to the other ones out there, and a little bit about grunge eating.
So the Traveling Belly was named by my wife, Kana. So she's in advertising. She names everything important in my life. So the finely chopped, this thing, or even the home chefies, which we've done recently. Now, grunge eating was a term which I coined, coming from the rock music world of it. Because a lot of food writing which I would do would be about regular places, street corner places, old family-run eateries, or things like that, which necessarily didn't have a PR or marketing budget, versus a lot of what was written about, especially at that time in mass media, thankfully it's changed, was very manicured pieces about five-star hotels or travels to Switzerland and all of that. But it didn't seem to be about real life eating. So I would like go to the streets and go to the corners and to the hunt out places, and I would think of myself as a rock star. One can always daydream. So and that's why grunge eating. So my book, The Traveling Belly, which was published by Hachette Publishing, is a food travelogue. So it's based about my experiences of traveling across about 13 or 14 cities in India, with of course a bigger focus on Mumbai and Calcutta. These are places which I traveled to largely during my days as a market researcher, when I'd travel on work and then eat. And then I wrote about that. But a book takes a while to publish. So by the time the drafts were ready, I'd already moved into full food writing. And then got a deeper understanding of food as I got to interact with top chefs, authors, writers. So the final draft, I think, or the final book reflects a bit of that. So and I think what makes it unique is that there are very few food travelogues which have come out of India, and a bulk of food publishing happens to be recipe-based books. So I think that's what makes it this thing, and it also comes from a diarist perspective. It comes from a sociologist's perspective. So it's not very geeky. It's something you can sit back or lie down on a bed and read. That would spoil your eyes, my mom would tell me when I was a kid. but we all like to do that.
All right. And Kalyan, one of your favorite discoveries while you were doing the book, I'm sure you have tons of favorites, but I'm going to ask you for one or two.
Okay, so instead of discovery, let me tell you about the place where I sat and wrote the book. I think that's so I live in a suburb called Bandra in Mumbai, which is a fairly popular suburb. You could say it's a slightly hipsterish suburb as well. And all
one of my favorite areas.
All the King Khans, the Salman Khans, Amir Khans out there stay there, and jokers like me. But there's a cafe called Candies, which is literally 2 or 3 lanes away from where we stay. It's set up by Goan family. So I started writing the book when I just moved out of my corporate career. And there was this almost a period of a year where I was feeling a bit rudderless because I decided to be a food writer and I didn't know how. And sitting at home was like really getting to me. And then the book contract happened. So that's when Kainaz, my wife, suggested that since sitting at home gets to you, why don't you go to Candies and write? So every morning I'd put my laptop into the haversack and go down there, and I had a particular table, and there was this lady, Sylvia, she still is at this counter. So she knew my order. One fried egg and 2 toasts would come with that, and a cappuccino. And I would just sit there and write. And there would be a lot of noise because kids would come in, grandparents, dating couples, and it was a melting spot. So there would be elderly folks, younger folks. But to me, it was like a hum at the back of my mind. And versus, say, if I'm at home and say if there's someone at home and wants my attention, that disturbs me. But when I'm sitting and writing there, so I sat there, wrote my book, and then did all my other work, my columns and stuff, till a time came where I was ready to work from home. And then the pandemic came, and by then I was pretty prepared for that. So for me, I thought that's pretty interesting.
Wow. I'm definitely looking forward to checking it out when I'm next in Bombay.
Oh, yes. And you get the softest, thickest sandwiches in the world and these lovely Goan potato chops. So when I do food walks in Bandra, I always take people there and we start off. And especially people from the West are very fascinated because when they look at the food, it looks very European. Right. But when they taste it, it's very different. It's very Indian because it's Portuguese influenced, but with an Indian touch, because that's what Goan food is.
And Kalyan, you've done some of your formative years in Kolkata. You've lived in Bombay for a large stretch of time, and you're married to a Parsi. How has that influenced your taste buds and your creativity?
Oh, I think that I owe everything to that. And like I said, even before Calcutta, I was in England and then Iran. And my dad passed on when I was about 9 years old. Ooh. But even in that short time, I think he had sort of nudged me to sort of try different things. And therefore I had, tried out different cuisines, cultures, and had a very curious mind towards that. And when I moved to Mumbai, then one got exposed to a huge diversity of Indian cuisine, which one wasn't exposed to in Calcutta. And also Mumbai is also the global hub, and that's where all the food trends and the transitions, including the first transition in India towards a new wave of international cuisine happened. And then the fact that one's married to a Parsi and their type of food. And my mom, though Bengali, grew up in Delhi, so there was a lot of Punjabi influence in our food while growing up. So I love it. I love trying everything, and everything changes. So when I started blogging, I was all about dude food and meat and this, that, and stuff. But over the last few years, I think as I'm growing older, I'm also learning to appreciate vegetarian food, Bengali food, and all that. So it's nice. It's nice. There's so much to discover.
Lovely. And you mentioned a little earlier the food tours. That's something that really caught my attention. So you do food tours or did food tours? I'm not quite sure if it's still running during the pandemic, but food tours in Bombay. Yes. I mean, this is something that really excites me. And my husband's actually really keen on doing one with you when he comes to Bombay next.
I would love to take him. So
tell us a bit more.
So this started in 2011. Right. I think there were probably no food tours in Mumbai then. Even now, there are hardly anyone, very few people who do it. But one was exposed to the concept of food tours when one went abroad. And then there were folks whom I met, like Zant Clay, who's a journalist with the Daily Telegraph in London, then Simon Majumdar, food writer, who wrote the foreword for my book. So when they came to Mumbai, I took them around to different parts of the city, and they said we should do food tours. And a lot of my readers wrote in saying that they would like to eat with me because they would see me traveling with my friends and eating. And then 11 is when I made the transition from corporate to freelance. And probably the first entrepreneurial activity which I did was starting food tours. And what I would do is I'd take very small groups, like 6 to 8 people, and take them to different parts of Mumbai, like Fort, which is the original central business district, or Bori Mohalla, which is more the most Muslim district, Dadar, which is more about Maharashtrian food, Bandra, which is, like I told you, more of a sort of hipsterish place, so to speak,
Yes.
and take people over there and introduce the city of Mumbai through its food. And it could be foreigners, it could be people from across India who'd made Mumbai their home. It could be
Mm-hmm.
Mumbaiers who hadn't gone there. So
Mm-hmm.
I did this fairly regularly for the first couple of years, where I do at least a couple of tours a month. Where in Mumbai, you still don't have that sort of traveler traffic as you would in Europe to have many food tours. But then,
Mm-hmm.
as I got into my writing career, like as the book came up, and I started writing columns first for Femina, then Times of India, NDTV Food, and all that, I decided that I would need to prioritize my time.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped doing regular food walks. So now I do them more by custom. So there are
Mm-hmm.
people who engage me. They've been once there was a Hollywood lawyer who's interested in food, or once there was a journalist from London doing a story on biryani, or once there were these two people from South Africa who run a boutique hotel and they were looking for inspiration. So or there were these two ladies in Toronto who were setting up a restaurant which is open now called Bombay Street Food. So they
Uh,
wanted to understand the vibe of Bombay and its food. So I get a brief from them and then tailor it accordingly, and now do sort of premium food tours for them. So that's how I do it. And
Fabulous.
even my book, The Traveling Belly, the brief
Uh-huh.
from my editor was write it as if you're talking to people on your food walks. And that's what I did.
Like I said, that's something that's totally exciting for me, and I can't wait to hit Bombay and come on one of your food tours. I mean, I did a couple of years in Bombay. I have lived over there, but I bet I haven't found any of the gems that you would probably show us on your tour. And as you mentioned, your Instagram is filled. But first, before I talk about the cats, I'm going to ask you about something that actually caught my attention and where I actually discovered you. And that was the Home Chefies Awards. Okay. So I believe it's a beautiful concept and quite an empowering tool for especially for women. But I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that with the home chefs, so the home chefies. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Kalyan.
Yes. So it got over about a couple of Sundays back, but it's I don't think it's something which gets over. Like even today,
Mm-hmm.
there was a beautiful article in Femina, which is the landmark magazine for women, covering it. They did a beautiful story. And but while the event happened over the last couple of months, but the inception of it was at the start of the pandemic. Home chefs are not new to India in terms of, when I'm talking of people who cook from home and then sell the food either through tiffins, dabbas, or
Right.
papas and pickles. In 2012-13, there were a few people who came out, largely women, who probably belong to our sort of social class, which would be middle to upper. And
Mm-hmm.
they started presenting their food in pop-ups at home or in hotels of this thing. And those are the first home chef brands which were being created. But where
Right.
this movement really took off was after the pandemic, and
Mm-hmm.
where there were lockdowns, and people were tired of cooking, tired of working, restaurants were shut, and a lot of people started cooking food from home and
Mm-hmm.
retailing it, and people felt that there was a certain level of trust if someone's cooking it from home. And then
Right.
one started trying out their food, and one had some of the most fabulous food which one has had over the years, because the sort of diversity of food which is
Mm-hmm.
out there, like how diverse India is, like different states, provinces, cities. Within a city, different parts of the city would have different types of food, and it all sort of came out. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then when restaurants and hotels came back, and people thought that home chefs would fizzle out, but they didn't. And there were two reasons for that. One is because people discovered how good home chefs were, and
Right.
two is home chefs began to realize that they had so much power. And for India, this is social change, because
Mm-hmm.
the workforce is largely male.
Mm-hmm.
Even the chefs are largely male across the world and in India. But home
Right.
chefs are largely women, and
That's
suddenly they
right.
were, in many cases, running families with job loss or businesses closing down because of the pandemic. And
Mm-hmm.
this, as it grows, can lead to huge social empowerment and change. So we
Wonderful.
thought that we should do something to sort of celebrate this, and I collaborated with Book a Workshop, which is started by a young lady herself, Nidhi Agarwal, during the lockdown baby of hers. So I first did some workshops through them on brand building for home chefs. And then we came up with this idea where we would sort of award home chefs on the basis of the brands they were building. So no
Right.
tasting. So we went by the brands and the stories. We got a jury which had the top corporates of India, because I was very clear that I didn't want judges from the food world. I wanted judges from the corporate world who know what brand building is all about. And
Right.
you know, I was humbled and touched by the sort of jury which we got. I mean, it's a sort of jury which award shows like Cannes or Curious or Spikes or whatever, like My Wife's World would love to have, and we got them in our first year. And they were so
Wow.
sincere. I mean, these were like head of big companies who were judging, and the food industry supported it by spreading the word. We had 800 entries, and then
Wow.
there were 11 winners or so across the categories. There's a champion, there were nominees, and then when I was going through the final list, I know a lot of home chefs in Mumbai because we've been trying their food and stuff. But when I saw the final list, it stunned me that there were so many in the list who were not them. I thought that they would be getting all the awards, but there were, there were people from across 40 cities in India who took
Really?
part. And the
Uh-huh.
winners there were two from Mumbai, two from Bangalore, Delhi, Jalandhar, and stuff. So I'm a bit this thing that maybe my friends didn't win the top honors, but it also tells you how impartial a system one had created. And I used a lot of
Mhm.
one's market research sort of background to set it up. And it's great to see the sort of reception which it's got, and we hope to take this ahead because this is one industry we strongly believe in, and the
Right.
pandemic's been about supporting small business, vocal for local. We've tried to make
Mhm.
these hashtags a way of life.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I really hope it carries on further, and I'm looking out for it. Um, and the other, as you mentioned, the other a lot of posts that have been dominating your Instagram feed have been on cats. So, Kalyan, what's with the cats? So, why?
Would you believe it that I used to dislike cats? I
Mhm.
love pets. I've loved dogs since my childhood. When I went to
Right.
Nara Park in Japan with the deer, I was very happy. Rabbits in Iran, we had tortoise. I've disliked cats. Then in November 2019, there was this little cat which came into our staircase, and sort of nuzzled against my foot. And then we
Uh-huh.
became friends. And I thought it was a girl, and I named her Maharani because she was a regal. It reminded me of the Maharani Gayatri Devi.
Right.
And then it came across some people who are not that kind, and his life was in danger. So we took her in, and
Uh-huh.
then a vet told me that her is a he,
Oh
and
dear.
we had to change the. So by then my wife had already started calling him Baby Loaf because of the loaf position. So that became his name. And
Right.
then there was another cat which was born in our building in May during the lockdown, and I
Right.
named it Nimki and the mother Mishti. So there's Bengali sweets and Bengali snacks.
Hmm.
Then we got the mom neutered, and then we thought the baby has to stay with us to be safe. The mom's also in the building. So then
Right.
little Nimki became our friend. Then as I started going for walks, there were all the sort of cats in the area, and there was one very tiny cat called Small who'd come up to me and
Uh-huh.
see me and sit on my sneakers. And because of that fellow, I started walking every day. Earlier, I was
Oh.
pretty lazy about that. And then very recently, it was raining very heavily. And one of my
Uh-huh.
friends who feeds the cat, she said, "You have to see this kitten. She's very cute." And then we saw in the rain in the evening, and I held it and I, squished it, and it came and kissed me and stuff, and hugged me and climbed over my head, all in the rains, and I'm holding an umbrella. And then we figured out the next day the poor thing's limping. So the day after that,
Ouch.
I took him to the vet, and I figured out he's not a kid. It's 7 months old, but
Oh.
malnourished. And
Uh-huh.
because, it was 7 months old, it got into a territorial fight and bashed up. So
Ouch.
every day we've been taking him to the vet to be dressed and all that. I took him there in the morning, and we got his neutering done today, and abscess cleaned and all that. And as I'm talking to you, another of my friends going and getting him home. I took him in the morning and I was just holding him like this, saying,
Hmm.
"You'll be fine." So yeah, so they talk about cliches not always being true. So you've heard of
Right.
the cliche of the crazy cat lady. Well, I'm one. Yes, but and
Well
my
done,
wife was
Kalyan.
never so. My wife was never into pets. Forget cats.
Right.
But once Baby Loaf became a part of our house, then Baby Loaf, Nimki, all small sushi, like and everyone in our family is falling in love with them. So it's been quite a game changer. And the beautiful thing was when I
Wonderful.
started posting about them, in the beginning there were some people who said, "Oh, there's a food place. We don't like cats. This, that, whatever." I said, "Well, it's my place." And now it's changed to an extent where there's so many people who've said that we were not fond of cats. Now we
Hmm.
started feeding cats. We are getting them neutered. We are adopting cats. It's good if one's able to sort of impact change in
Exactly.
this way. So
Exactly.
it's
And you
great.
just never know how your impact reaches far and wide, really. So, and before I say goodbye to you, Kalyan, one last question. In your opinion, how do you believe the food face of Mumbai? I mean, you can tell me the rest of India as well, but I'll probably focus in on Mumbai. How do you believe the food face of Mumbai has changed in the last decade?
Yeah, so I think the last decade was where the liberalization of India started, beginning to flower, and
Hmm.
and Mumbai was at the helm of it. So there were a lot of international trends, brands, and sort of food which was coming into the city, and I think that Mumbai has always been the hub of creativity. Like it's also the
Hmm.
home of the Hindi film cinema, and we started seeing that in the food as well. But the other beautiful thing about Mumbai is that there's a lot of multi-ethnicity, and there's
Hmm.
food available from different parts of India over here. And in the last couple of years, what's happened is that there's been an appreciation of that, and also
Right.
an appreciation of what the city had to offer, which is the sort of stuff which I used to always write about in Finely Chopped. I mean, we have glorious food like family-run places where people who came to work in Mumbai would eat, and not enough of that was getting talked about earlier. But I think that the limelight's falling there. And in fact, I have a podcast series called Foodocracy India, where I talk
Oh,
about the stories of these sort of places. That's what I've spoken about, written about in my book, and
aha.
I'm glad to see that there's this diversity now coming into fore, and the younger generation beginning to appreciate that. So
Right.
I'm very excited.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that. And Kalyan, I'll say thank you very, very much for sharing all your insights and all your food love with us. And I'm looking forward to watching what else is coming out of Kalyan's kitchen and coming on his posts. So here's wishing
Thank you.
you.
I was saying thank you so much, Manisha. It was really kind of you to sort of invite me and to speak on your lovely talk show, and it's been an absolute pleasure to do so.
Pleasure's all mine. Take care, Kalyan. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.